our way through this obstacle-strewn course of society.
Okay, Mr. Clark, we have to take a break for a commercial. When we get back, the American idea of every boy or girl having an equal educational opportunity. I want to ask Mr. Clark what happens to those whom he throws out of school. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Crossfire. Our technical problems in Los Angeles and our satellite problems therefrom prevented us from having George McKenna, another famous black superintendent of schools from Inglewood, California, on the program tonight. But we intend to ask Mr. McKenna to come back to the studios in Los Angeles someday soon and be on this program. Now, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Clark, about the students you threw out, and you do throw a lot of them out, and I don't know what else you could do, because if you have rape, arson, and so forth in your schools, you've got to get rid of them. But what happens to them? Don't they wind up in the penitentiary?
Well, most of the students, in fact, all of the students, are given alternative modes of education, the adult school, the GED, etc. There are those, needless to say, who are going to end up in the cemetery, who are going to end up in jail. But regardless of where they might have been, I am convinced that for that very few, that minuscule number, the end product would be the same. Might I say this to you, Tom? I think that what we must do in America is begin to understand that public education, as it's presently set up, doesn't work. We must have a voucher system. We must give parents the right to choose where they send their child. That's the essence of free enterprise.
Well, look,
in this
I
country.
have one more question. You have the baseball bat and you have the bullhorn, and you didn't answer this question when I asked it before. How do you get one of your students to be interested in Shakespeare? You don't do that with a baseball bat.
You do that by high motivation. You do that by scintillating teachers. You do that by making certain that students understand, especially black and Hispanic students in the inner city, that their fates are inexplicably bound to the quality of education they receive. And that ultimately, and I hammer this home every day, that ultimately, first of all, they have to understand that there is a dichotomy between blacks and whites. Blacks in this country are academically inferior, generally, to whites. And what I hammer home to the black and Hispanic youth, if you're going to succeed, young people, you got two strikes against you. You're black and you're poor. You have one left, and you're going to have to work pertinaciously to overcome those.
All right. Let me ask you about.
I take no exception.
Let me ask you about the student rights movement. The Civil Liberties Union, the American Civil Liberties Union, which I followed over the years, has said that kids ought to have the right to dress as they like. If they wear slogans, obscene or not, in their sweatshirts, you shouldn't interfere with them. They ought to have the right to wear their hair as they like. They even have the right to carry into the schools these little beepers that they get calls on when they go out to move drugs. What are your thoughts on the ACLU? Now, this is a tough one.
Well, the ACLU certainly is not one of my allies, so I don't have any problem with stating my facts candidly. If I find someone who's a beeper, I'm going to take the beeper. If I find someone incorrectly clad, then I'm going to make sure that that person is taken to task for that. If I find or hear that drugs are in lockers, because I believe that the environment must be safe for 98% of those good students who are there to get an education, I'm going to get my sledgehammer and bang that door down piece by piece and see if there are drugs in there. Now, if that's a violation of their rights, then I'm sorry. I'm concerned about protecting an environment, a school, making it safe for the vast majority of young people.
Mr. Clark, Mr. Clark, let me ask you about the teachers once more. You routinely ball out the teachers in front of the students. Is that good practice?
Well, Tom, I think that allegation is erroneous because I don't do that. I must admit, when I went in there, a new broom sweeps clean. And I did cause a whole lot of obfuscation, but it was done to bring order to a chaotic situation. Today, might I state to you that we have a very superfluous relationship. We have a very amicable relationship. And I have not had a grievance filed against Joe Clark in 2 years. And I think that's saying something about my adjustment to the situation.
Mr. Clark, thank you for being our guest on Crossfire tonight.
Good to be here.
Pat and I will be back in just a minute.
Pleasure. Tom, if we had 10,000 Joe Clarks, the schools of America, the inner cities wouldn't be in the mess they are today, and you have to agree with that.
I would agree that Mr. Clark is a very good sergeant. I think he'd be a very good sergeant in the Army, but I don't know that baseball bat is the symbol for the education.
Well, I'm going to take you to his movie about his life, which comes out the 3rd of March, as I understand it, premieres, and you get a better insight into things.
I'll watch it with interest, Pat. From the left, I'm Tom Braden. Good night for Crossfire.
From the right, Pat Buchanan. Join us tomorrow night for another edition of Crossfire.
Tonight on Larry King Live, spiritual custody, when a court dictates your child's religious faith. The issue in 1 hour on CNN.
Go out and work for it.
Tonight, the beginning of something new from the reporters. It's a weekly segment called Byline. It's an opportunity for guests to alert us to matters of great concern to us all. Reporters aren't the only ones with stories to tell, nor are we always the best ones to tell them. Of course, the opinions expressed by our guests will be theirs alone. Tonight's Byline belongs to Joe Clark, the principal of Eastside High School in Paterson, New Jersey. He's an educator who, among other things, has turned the baseball bat into something more than the symbol of our all-American sport. He's a tough man with a no-nonsense sense of what education is all about. He has the support of people in high places, including President Reagan. And what's more, he has the gratitude and loyalty of his students and their parents. His byline is on rising above bad influence.
Here we stand, precariously perched on Mount Oblivion. Here we stand looking at all of the evils that have become so pervasive in our great society. Well, once great society. Drugs, guns, all types of epidemics, a declivity, a decline in our education, all types of nefarious things that have begun to etch away at the basic fabric of this great nation. How do you overcome these obstacles? How do you overcome the burdens that seem to be etching away at our very souls? You overcome them by understanding that success is failure turned inside out. How do you overcome these odds and these burdens? You overcome them by recognizing that if you want something in this life, you're going to have to go out and work for it. You might get a little tired, but that's the worst that could happen to you. How do you overcome the odds of bad influence? You have goals, you have objectives, and you work with unswerving tenacity, pertinacity, determination to reach those sometimes elusive goals. How do you overcome the bad influences that abound in our society? You overcome them by recognizing the role models that exist in our society, the great individuals who have made their marks and who have brought about a rejuvenation in our society. And yes, these great role models are the exact antithesis of the drug dealers, the hustlers, and the pimps, the no-good rapscallions that are defaming our total society. How do you overcome? You overcome by recognizing that all of our fates are inexplicably bound together and that we must work cooperatively, synergistically together as a human race.
Next week, another compelling byline. That and a story that will shock you because it's every parent's nightmare.
Their withdrawal.
Well, a man who speaks firmly and at times through a loudspeaker and carries a big baseball bat has made it into the movies. A film about Paterson, New Jersey high school principal Joe Clark had a hometown premiere today. David Diaz was there for that, and he's back now with the story. David?
Okay, Jack, and Joe Clark, that bat-wielding, megaphone-toting, no-nonsense principal of Paterson, New Jersey, gained national attention for his controversial approach to turning around an inner-city school. But who would have thought that even in this day and age, attention would have led to a movie about the man and his school? Well, one person who would have thought it is none other than the flamboyant and admittedly theatrical Joe Clark himself. It was like Hollywood come to Paterson, New Jersey. except that the premiere of the movie Lean on Me was during the day. And instead of limos, it was school buses bringing the audience to the opening. That's because the audience was made up almost entirely of the student body of East Side High. The co-star of this story about a man, Joe Clark, played by Oscar winner Morgan Freeman, who takes a school that is little more than a dumping ground, and by controversial methods such as mass expulsion, makes it a place where learning can and does take place.
They have harassed your teachers, and they have intimidated you. Well, times are about to change. You will not be bothered in Joe Clark's school. These people are incorrigible. And since none of them could graduate anyway, you are all expurgated.
And what did Joe Clark think of this celluloid version of himself?
This is going to be one of the most splendiferous movies that has occurred in the annals of theater history. It's great. My heart is palpitating with unadulterated glee.
Some of the students who played themselves in the movie put it this way.
All aboard, all aboard, I get me. All aboard, train is coming, train is coming. All aboard, yes, East Side High.
Yeah, a little hallway music. Not your typical school song, but then almost nothing that has happened at East Side High during Joe Clark's tenure has been typical. Long before the movie, there was concern in Patterson that all his notoriety had given Joe Clark an outsized ego. And now that he's Hollywood, well, that concern could become alarm.
There's a lot of humility there, looks like. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Up next, the life and times of Andy Warhol and the life of a bat-wielding principal. It all comes to life now with Jill Rappaport, center stage. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Michelle. Well, for years he's been making news as a tough-talking, no-nonsense principal in New Jersey. And now Joe Clark's unusual story has made it to the silver screen. Today, his students got a sneak peek at the film.
You do not do it all alone. I don't have to stay here and listen to these accusations.
You will. Lean on Me is a new movie starring actor Morgan Freeman as one of the most controversial educators in this country.
Everybody working. Let's see that, Monty. No talking in study hall.
He speaks loudly and carries a big stick. He's Joe Clark, the bat-toting Patterson, New Jersey principal, whose tough guy tactics have made it onto the big screen in a major Warner Brothers movie.
Don't talk to me about saving those kids. The mayor wants to save his budget.
You got a direct and honest depiction of Joe Clark and some of the experiences we had at East Side trying to bring about a reviviscence, and we're proud of that.
Joe Clark became principal of Patterson's East Side High in 1982. By 1987, his new brand of discipline had won him the nickname Crazy Joe. The former Army Reserve Sergeant made national news for expelling 300 students and chaining the school's exits and entrances in an effort to keep out local drug dealers, violating fire safety laws and defying the local school board. Today, the Clark story was played out in living color, a special screening for the students and staff of East Side High.
I thought it was great. I think they did a real good job on bringing out all the points, the good points and some of the negative points of it.
It was nice. It was real. It told the whole story.
But while the reception was positive today, controversy even followed the making of the movie. Some of it was shot at East Side High, and local officials criticized Clark for disrupting classes. The film opens in our area in early March, but Principal Clark says he has no plans to abandon Patterson for Hollywood. No way. Well, starting today in Manhattan,
He gained nationwide attention when his face appeared on the cover of Time magazine. Now there's a movie about Patterson's East Side High School principal, Joe Clark, and his students. Hollywood producers thought his Dirty Harry tactics with drug dealers and would play well on the big screen. So move over, Clint Eastwood. The Joe Clark story is about to make its debut, as Scott Moniak reports.
In 1967, Joe Clark was a teacher at East Side High School in Patterson, but his style didn't fit in.